It's really nice to be here, but looks like I was dressed for the wrong event. So it's really great to be here in India. It's actually not my first time. I have been to this country more than a dozen times, and I absolutely adore coming here. I used to come very often during my IBM days, and I love the fact that we have an engineering center in Bangalore and Hyderabad because it gives me an excuse to be coming here on a regular basis as well. The team at IBM asked me to give a talk here that is slightly different than some of the other technical talks that you will hear from the Google crowd. Instead of giving you a more deep dive into some technology piece, what I'm going to be talking mostly is what is Google doing in India and emerging markets in general. And I'm going to illustrate this by talking about how Google innovates internally. All of you are either developers, entrepreneurs, business owners, IT professionals. And one of the questions I always get when I attend these big events is, how does Google manage to create so many cool things and so fast? So I thought it would be extremely relevant to share with you what are the internal ingredients that the company has created that enable us to actually create such innovation very, very fast. And I'm going to be doing this in illustrating examples of what came out of that innovation, both from a global perspective, but also from a more India or emerging markets specifics as examples. Okay, so let me start with a little bit high level. And it's obviously, you all know this, that in less than 30 years, the internet has grown from 0 users to over 2 billion. Impressively enough, in case you don't know, it's available. You can connect to the internet in Mount Everest. You can also connect to the internet in the South Pole. And the amount of content that exists out there is just incredible. Over 325 billion websites already. About 100,000 tweets gets generated every minute. Every second, there is about 1 hour of video being uploaded to YouTube. And so the world is creating, on this huge platform, about 5 exabytes of data every single day. If you guys cannot, you guys are technical, so you should be able to do the math. But to help you, 5 exabytes is about 5 billion trucks, completely full of books. I don't think the world has 5 billion books, 5 billion trucks to be able to actually produce that. So obviously, that amount of data and that popularity has created some pretty impressive impact, both in our lives as well as in the economy of many, many countries. One of the big trends that many countries are starting to realize, and obviously we are thrilled to see that governments are realizing this, is the fact that the internet has become a major driver of the economic growth of some countries, particularly the developed countries. We are not there yet in the emerging markets. To give you a sense of this, 7% of the UK GDPs is dependent on the usage of the internet. 7%. And we believe that across the developed world, you will see at least 5% contribution to GDP by 2015 by all of the developed countries. Obviously, also with the huge amount of data that exists in the internet, search and the ability for people to find that whatever information we're looking for continues to become not only very, very important, but continues to become challenging and requires further development and search and research. The third thing that is obviously a very clear trend is the fact that the internet has obviously democratized information. And the information that exists out there is available to actually everyone. And this has made significant changes in the world with things that we have seen, for example, in the Arab Springs, right? With the use of technology, right, to keep governments on their toes, to eliminate corruption, and to even mobilize people with technologies and products like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Google Maps to bring people together on a common cause. And we're also seeing a lot of the web technology being used to solve real problems, real life problems that the world sees. A very good example of that is the use of maps and map maker by the World Bank and the UN for relief and disaster control, and has actually helped already millions of people. However, in the developing countries, India being a very good example of that, things are not there yet. So I don't want you to get confused with these two numbers. So the first set of numbers tells you that today, in the developed world, in average, the internet contributes to 3.4 of their country's GDP. While in the developing countries, here calling aspiring countries, it's only contributing to 1.9%. But what is very impressive is that in the developed countries, the growth that we saw coming out of these countries in their GDP, just the growth piece, right? 21% of that growth came from internet between 2004 and 2009. While in the developing countries, unfortunately, only 2.3% of that growth was caused by the internet. And obviously, this is something we need to change, particularly given that we all know that it was exactly the developing countries that grew the most in the last few years. There is many reasons for that, and I don't want to go through all the details of this chart, but the summary, the big picture here is that blue is good, gray is bad. Right? And if you look at the developing countries, and I highlighted India, you can see that except for financial capital, in terms of financial capital investment for the internet, what we need to get the internet to be broadly used and across the board, it still has a long ways to go. In particularly, everything related to infrastructure, right? Internet infrastructure and internet accessibility, the ability for people to really to get to the internet. So, that's the reason why what our mission from Google in India, as well as actually, honestly, in all emerging markets, is to really try to make the internet an integral part of the life of every single person. And not only those, the minority that today can afford to do it. And we are trying to do this actually focusing on three areas. The first area is, can I actually work with operators? Can I do investments on infrastructure to bring price down, to bring cheaper devices into the market, to bring connectivity into remote areas so that everybody can actually come online. The second area is, if people now can all come online, do they have relevant products and services to use? And while many of the global products that Google develops are appealing to almost everyone, we all do know that many of these products need to be tailored to specific markets. Not everyone has an iPhone or an Android, and they use very simple phones to access the internet. Network speed and reliability is not the same in these markets, so how do you actually change these products, and so on and so forth. And third is, we obviously need help to build that, and the way we're going to get that help is by strengthening and growing the ecosystem. Folks like you, developers, IT professionals, business owners that can together with us continue to support the growth of the internet. So I want you to keep that mission in mind, because I'm now going to focus into how Google innovates, and I'm going to be talking about examples of how we innovate, and I will come back to these three items, showing how some of the innovations that we have brought here to India relate to these three pillars. So how does Google innovate? I would say that the very first rule that the company has internally is for you to look for a mission that matters. You saw the mission that my team in emerging markets had in the previous slides. Make the internet an integral part of the life of every person. That's a big mission, right? That's a mission that will motivate people. That's a mission that you're not going to accomplish by tomorrow. But obviously, as you are thinking big, develop a strategy that allows you in small steps gets there. Otherwise, obviously, people will get disencouraged. And that's actually what we're trying to do across the board. And here in India, a very good example of that was the introduction of the Google Internet bus, right? It's a small step towards that big mission on allowing every person in the country to experience the internet. And those of you that are not familiar with, right, the Internet bus is basically a bus that travels across the country, it stays a few days in different locations, and allows people to actually access the computers that are in this bus and use the internet. And we have already reach out to more than 8.4 million people. And many of the folks that actually use this have seen the internet actually for the first time. So that's the first rule. So once you have a big mission and you motivate people, right, now the next thing to do is enable them to flourish, enable them to come up with their own ideas and follow those ideas. That's a very, very important aspect of the internal Google culture. And you have heard lots of ingredients that the company has created to enable that. Create a bottom-up culture, right? Create a very engineering-centric culture. Bottom-up in the sense of eliminate hierarchy, flatten the management structure as much as possible. Don't shoot anybody that challenges authority or challenging decisions from the bottom, so that everybody feels empowered to bring their ideas forward. On top of that, allowing people to have 20% time. This is the time that Google allows, 20% of your work time for them to pursue whatever they want, obviously, as long as it's legal. And so if people have ideas and they have some time to debate and they are passionate, they will pursue those ideas. And many of the products that you are familiar with, and I actually listed some efforts from Google, came out of those 20%. When I usually talk about this, and particularly many of you that may have worked in hierarchical companies, like I have done in my IBM days, do not take this very seriously. And so I always like to pause here and say, please do take this very seriously, because you don't know where ideas come from. And if you think that all great ideas from Google came from Larry and Sergey, obviously you are absolutely wrong. And to make my point even more strongly, here are two examples of things that you are probably familiar with. The YouTube Interactive, you probably have watched YouTube videos that you have text or bubbles or other things on top of the video. You can click on them and go to navigate another video, or you can answer a question, etc. That's one example. The second feature you might be familiar with if you are a Gmail user is the wrong Bob. When you start typing email addresses and you say Bob something, and the system, and you pick, in this case, Bob Jones, but what you really meant was Bob Smith, Gmail will actually ask you, do you mean Bob Smith instead, so that you don't get embarrassed sending the email to the wrong person. These two features came from interns. Two interns that joined Google and also took advantage of their 20% time, had this, created a prototype, showed to some people, got other guys motivated to work with them, and now these are one of the most popular features on these two corresponding products. So do take that very seriously, because you really don't know where the next great idea is going to come from. And the more you can create an environment that would allow people to bring those ideas and pursue them, the better off you are going to be. An example of that, right, is SMS Channels, a product that was developed specifically for India and launched here in 2008. How many of you actually use SMS Channels? How many of you have ever heard of SMS Channels? Okay, some. I'm not surprised that it is a minority of you that actually do that. This product was not created for the folks that have 24/7 connectivity, right, and desktops and fancy mobile devices. This product was created for people that have simple phones, usually only voice and SMS, but are dying to get relevant information that is available on the internet. And the product basically allows them to subscribe to channels. Those could be news, could be interesting content, but it could also be the joke of the day and stuff like that. And they receive that content via SMS on their device. So really focusing on the bottom of the pyramid that cannot actually afford to come to the internet. The whole idea came out of India, was developed here, and is extremely popular. It is used by several millions of people on a daily basis in the country. To give you another example, a lot of people say Gmail is a very popular and successful product. And when you have successful products, it's very hard for you to increase the market share or growth that product. Well, late last year, we actually extended Gmail with some very simple features that are available here. Basically, the ability for you to sign up to Gmail using a very simple feature phone. The ability for you to interact with Gmail and Gmail chat via SMS. And without even announcing or making a major marketing campaign around this, we saw the increase of Gmail signups in all the emerging market countries where we launched this by 50% within a few weeks. Obviously, people sitting in California or in the nice offices in Zurich, where I'm actually located, probably would not have had the great idea to do this, because they all have top-notch connectivity, they have beautiful desktop devices, and they all have probably an iPhone and also an Android device, so there is no reason for them to actually think about coming up with these ideas. And so enabling, creating that environment so the engineers here in Bangalore and in other countries in emerging markets have those ideas, pursue them, and bring them to market is very important. Similarly, we have also extended G+, with the ability to run on feature phones, and also for you to be able to receive SMS notifications and follow people via SMS and comment and post via SMS. So that the large population that only access the internet when they go to an internet cafe can set up their G+ account so that when they get out of the internet cafe, any posts or any comments that were made on their posts, etc., can come to them via SMS, and they can continue to interact and follow what's going on in the system using an SMS interface. So those are simple ideas that will come up and will be followed if you create the environment. Obviously, now you create competition, right? Google hires brilliant engineers, all of which are very aggressive, all of which wants to make a difference, and many of them will end up trying to compete amongst one another. So how do you ensure that people cooperate instead of compete? Very simple, right? Be as open as possible and share as much as you possibly can. And honestly, internally within Google, there is almost no secret. Every employee has their own profile where you can see their resume, you can see what they are working on, you can see what their quarterly goals are. Anybody in the company can see what my quarterly goals are. And at the end of the quarter, they will be able to see how I self-evaluate myself. So there is no bullshitting, right? Because if I start to inflate what I did, everyone that works with me will realize that. So peer pressure makes sure that all the BSing is eliminated. So that creates cooperation. You can also look at the goals of any one of our senior vice presidents or Larry Page himself. Every quarter, the company financials are presented to every single employee in a worldwide all hands. Every engineer that joins a company has access to the source code of every system that Google has developed. The equipment, the infrastructure that is available to anyone in China, in India, in Brazil, in Europe, or in the US is exactly the same. Every week you can look at what people has done, what we call snippets, and you can subscribe to them. So that every Monday you received an email with whatever the people that you have subscribed to their snippets have done the previous week and what they are planning to do that week. There is a database with every project in the company, so if you have an idea, the first thing you will do is go into that database and see if anybody is trying to pursue the same thing. And so by doing that, you encourage cooperation and instead of competition. Obviously, you have to go beyond that and also think externally. And Google does a lot to be as open as possible with the outside world. And here is just one example with the work that we do with developers, right? Over 3,000 projects, or 2,000 projects that we have actually contributed to open source. Over 30 million lines of code that we have actually contributed. Plus Google APIs, usage of App Engine, and so on and so forth. Maybe an even better example is obviously the development of Android, which you know was a joint effort between Google and many other companies, and has enabled the creation of the largest mobile platform in the world. And we are thrilled to have received the prize of the Best Mobile Platform for Developers here this year. And by the way, thank you all for those of you that actually voted for us. Another example of openness, and this is here an example directly from India, came from the work that we did in Bangalore around MapMaker. And I want to show you a quick video of Madurai being mapped starting in 2008. This was maps of Madurai. And what you have here is snapshots of the changes of the maps in the city within a few months after we launched the product there. And then basically rolling over fast over time. So you can see, right, a huge difference in terms of the quality of the maps of the city within just a few months. This was only possible, obviously, because the tool is available for the community. Anybody can take advantage of it and actually help us. So that's the third rule. Try to be as open and share as much as you possibly can. Obviously, you now have still ideas in groups of people that are pursuing their ideas, but there are still sometimes multiple alternatives of what is the best solution to a given problem. So how you then decide which one is the best way to pursue. Right? You can go the traditional way, right, and go ask the boss to make the decision. But let's face it, honestly, in most cases, the boss knows a lot less than you guys. But just because he has the title as the position, he's put in a spot to actually make a decision. So what we try to do internally is to use data as much as we possibly can. And let me give you some very clear examples of that. How do you guys probably use Google search, and this is an ad. I don't think you can recognize the color here. But when you go to the Google search, you'll see that there is a very light color behind the ads on top of search. It's actually pink. How do you guys know, how do you think we know that pink is the best color to be behind ads so that people click the most? When I actually asked this question at an event, somebody told me, well, you guys got 10 marketing people, put in a room and say, you guys fight, and whoever survives will tell us what the color is, right? Yeah, that's a way of doing it. Obviously, that's not the way we do it. And you can imagine the amount of subjective discussions that took place between blue and pink and the yellow fans and the green fans and so on and so forth. Actually, what we did is run experiments, right? Showing a gazillion of different colors to users, seeing how they behave and how much time they click on the different ads, and then based on that, decide the color. So you can see that even in very subjective areas, you can always find a way of using data to drive decisions. Here, another more technical example. Can any one of you read this? I can't either, and neither can the engineers that actually work on this product. So how do they know, right, that the suggestions that Google is making in the autocomplete are the most relevant ones for whatever the person is typing? Again, run experiments, right, with different algorithms, show the results of those algorithms to the user, see how they behave, see how much they click on the results, and based on that, you know whether the algorithm is making a difference or not. Another very good example that is applicable to India and actually across the emerging markets, where Google continues to make decisions on where do we deploy our POPs, our entry points to the Google network, and where we should be putting Google caches in the network. Google caches are the place where we store things like YouTube and maps and stuff like that. And so how do we know where to put this? Actually, very, very data-driven. We monitor the traffic that we receive. Where is it coming from? For what products? In what time of the day? Right? Where is it coming from? From what network? Is it through an internet exchange point? And so on and so forth. And based on that, we actually drive those deployments. So it's still going to be the case that you're going to have, even though you are using data, you're still going to be tied between one or two approaches in many, many cases. So how you then make a decision of which approach you're going to pursue? So the next rule that we use is we try as much as possible to put the users first and think on monetization afterwards. And there is many examples of those. Probably one of the most popular ones is the fact that we try as much as possible to separate between the places where ads are being shown to search results, so that's very clear to the user, not allowing what advertisers pay and whatever happens on the ad size to influence the results of search and so on and so forth. However, there is a lot of other things that we do that shows pointing the users first. A very good example is the work done here in India on transliteration. You guys probably know what that is, and extremely useful for you to be able to type in a Roman keyboard in using the phonetic to actually transform this automatically, in this case in Hindi, but it could be Hebrew, Arabic, or something else. Also, a lot of the work that we do in support and in growth of the communities. And here in India specifically, there is a lot that is happening. This year alone, we're going to be having 5 major G days. Those are our developer events across the country. The one in Bangalore, by the way, is going to be happening the 3rd week of July. We have programs with universities where we support students, where we train student ambassadors on our technology. Growth of communities, both technical communities as well as business communities. And we're going to be launching next month here in India a pilot on a set of curriculum and a certification on web technology. So the last rule, which is probably one of the most important ones and tends to be ignored by many developers and many business entrepreneurs, is speed. And speed is very important across the board. How many of you actually have used or have bought this Android device? The very first one. Nobody? Oh, you did. How did you like it? Did you like it? I thought it was pretty crappy compared to what we have available today. Right? In fact, today I am kind of embarrassed to even say that I had one. And the reason for that is, obviously, Google launched this very early on and learned a lot to be able to evolve to what the highly sophisticated devices that we see in the market today. So bring this to market and iterate very fast is extremely important. It's also very important because time to market is essential, and every new piece of technology that is created goes through this evolution. Usually in 5 steps, where very early on a very small number of people attempt to adopt the technology. Usually we'll call them the innovators. Soon after that, it's still a quite small number of people. The early adopters will start adopting your technology. And soon after that, a huge majority, the early majority, will go in. If you deliver your technology somewhere in here, you miss the market. Because by the time you get out, there has been a momentum behind the technology of your competitor. So speed is very important. Bring it to market as fast as you can and iterate and improve it over time. Obviously, speed is important across the board, not only in terms of time to market, but also in terms of products. You guys saw the improvement that Google made a year or so ago in search, creating a search instant, right? Something that was almost unthinkable of, that you can be getting search results in ads as you are typing certain queries. And also the work on Chrome, right, to make it, the browser extremely fast so that it has made Chrome one of the most popular browsers in the world. Okay, so summarizing. So if you want to create a very innovative environment, right, define missions that are very big and challenging to motivate everyone work on it. Give time for people to pursue those ideas and create an environment that would allow anyone to bring up their ideas and pursue them. Be very open, very transparent, share everything so that you encourage people to cooperate instead of compete with one another. And you should do this both internally as well as externally. Use data to make decisions as much as possible. And if the data is not enough, try to put the users first before you actually monetize it. And last, move as fast as you can in terms of speed of execution and time to market. And to wrap up, you saw the examples I gave to India and emerging markets and where they would fall into our strategy. With that, thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a great and very successful event. Thank you.